shine on a tidal river, and they knew they'd discovered the mouth of a large river. And they explored it right up to the head of his valley, and being such a majestic river, they named it after the then young Queen of England, Victoria. And she was well named, because like most famous women, she's a little temperamental. During the dry season, she's calm and tranquil. But round about November, December, when the storms come, she really gets stirred up, and she becomes a raging torrent of muddy, silty water. Picks up the topsoil from a watershed of 90,000 square miles, and carts it to the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf. There she spews it over a 26-mile wide mouth into the Timor Sea. The Aborigines called the mouth Wonga River, meaning talking devil, for she oozes and sucks the mud in and out from 24-foot tides. Tidal bore rips in over 4 foot an hour. And ocean-going vessels can travel up to 70 miles upstream, flat-bottom barges for 120. They must lift their anchor at least once a day, otherwise it becomes stuck in the mud. She's about 500 miles wide, the queen of all rivers in the territory, and she rises in the spinifex plains of the great sandy desert and up at Wayville Station, unassuming name River's Edge. And this morning it is my pleasure to show you a small but very, very beautiful part of Victoria. Round the brow of the hill, underneath the bridge, and a further 250 miles to the sea. But about 100 miles west of here, she passes the little service town of Timber Creek, once known as the Depot. How Timber Creek got its name was the explorer Augustus Gregory came up the river in his sloop, the Tom Chum. And just before he got there, he ran aground on some rocks. So they used the timber from the nearby creek to mend his boat. That's how Timber Creek got its name. Out there, sitting up there in the rock bar, you'll see a little white bird. That's a white egret. Very fragile bird. That's the one with the Japanese paint so well. This little creek you see coming in here forward on our left, it's called Gregory Creek. Well, back in 1855, Augustus Charles Gregory was commissioned by the government to explore the source of the Victoria River. They thought that perhaps it led to the fabled inland sea. Or, better still, it may bisect the continent like the great Mississippi. Well, unfortunately, it did not. But Gregory made 2 trips up the river in search of the source. And on each return, any stores he had left over, he left near the mouth of this little creek, in anticipation of his trek back south. He went back to the depot, picked up the rest of his gear, came here, collected the stores. Then the brave, adventurous men, perhaps a little foolish, marched off into the unknown. Well, they followed this little creek as far eastward as they could. Crossed over, they found the Roper River, followed that down to the Gulf country, thence the Gulf rivers to Burkett. Here they were supposed to be picked up, taken home by the mothership, the Monarch. But the Monarch had run into bad weather and was late in arriving. Gregory thought he had missed the boat, so he continued on his trek right back through central Queensland to Britain. Quite a feat. By the name of Elsie on Gregory's expedition, after which Elsie Station was named, but we of the Never Never train. And between here and Kununurra, you'll cross the east and west Baines rivers. Baines was the South African artist on Gregory's expedition, and he was the first to draw these good places way back in 1855. And they have changed very, very little to this day. This path you see coming right now, for her magnificent reflections, the colours, the clarity, and the depth. It has been compared to Milford Sound and the Gordon in Tasmania, which are renowned for their reflections, but none are as colourful as Victoria. She's as pretty as a picture. Always watch the ripples on the water. Sometimes the reflections are much clearer than others. about the boat any way you wish to photograph. You can walk right up on that apron at the front there if you like. You get a nice clear shot from up there. And I promise not to put the brake on. The river's Ledger, or Eucalyptus Canal de Legend. Not to be confused with the Ghost Gums further south, Eucalyptus Papuan. Called the red gum because the wood inside is red. Over here on the right-hand side, you know, reflecting to a limb before the sun, looking like the embers and the deer. On beyond those, you'll see a little dark green leaf tree along the water's edge. That is the freshwater mangrove, or Barringtonia acrotanca. And that is the one that the Aborigines strip the bark off and burn the billabongs to get their fish. That contains a lot of little billabongs and a lot of mangroves. And the trees you see, willowy, pendulous-like limbs, forming a curtain of greenery along the banks. Other paper barks or melaleuca, eucalyptus. The birds you see sitting in the trees and flying around here are kites. Now there are three types of kites that frequent this area, easily distinguished by the shapes of their tails. The black kite has a forky tail. The fair-tailed kite is straight across. And the whistling kite is slightly lighter in colour, but with a round tail. They congregate around here because this is the closest point on the river, the upper tip from the abattoir. Nothing whatsoever from the abattoir is expelled into this beautiful river. And there are clever birds here at the kite. Wherever you see a fire come in, you'll see these birds. But they catch the insects in the updraft of the fire. Or they're often known as the fire hook. My favourite to get over is on the side of it, you know, a flat spot. The ship, Lieutenant Lord Stokes, sailed the river, HMS Beagle. Charles Darwin also saw some considerable time on the lake. On the left-hand side, and the stark reflection from the dead limbs, as opposed to the willowy greenery of the lake parks and pandanus. This little red valley is a rather special part of the territory. For only here do you find the colours of the centre, combined with the rock formations of the Arnhem Land escarpment on a grand scale. Well, she's a colourful lady, Victoria. The blue skies, the red cliffs, a symphony of greens along the banks, and she reflects her beauty. Oh, look up there, an ancient Aboriginal sacrificial altar. So by the end of the dry season, the grass is gone, the trees have shed their leaves to conserve moisture, the river stops running, it's a fairly stark and desolate landscape. But around about November, December, the storms come, and the whole scene changes overnight. There's water everywhere, and everything becomes lush, green, beautiful. So the wet digging never fails. Oh, we get about 30 inches of rain here, and February is usually our wettest month. The average depth of water at the moment is around about 20 feet. But as you can imagine, Victoria can rise to some great height. Look back up here on the left-hand side, right back up in this gum tree. There you'll see a dead log caught up in the fork. Now you can imagine the width of the river when it's at that height, from escarpment to escarpment. It's a slow-moving mass of muddy, silty water. Most likely lodged up there in 1982, got a pretty big wet. The river rose to 27 feet over the beach. That's not the highest flood recorded though, that was back in 1974. The same year of Cyclone Tracy, when the river rose to 36 feet over the beach. Lucky the little pup wasn't sitting where she is today. When they put that bridge in there, the engineer said, oh, it'll go under once every 30 years. Well, it's been there 17 years. It's been under 20 times. I do have to breathe. I do this about every half an hour or 40 minutes with a nostril while I'm in the snout there. Yeah, what else you like that? In other areas they go to another state, but eventually it's right to the back up in Redwood. Hey, did anybody have an appointment at 11:30 back at the inn? They can find you down the line. When they see the white marks on the rocks, where the water has seeped in behind them and washed the white pipe layout, the rocks have fallen away. Well, if you see the black marks, that's where the water comes over the top of the escarpment during the wet season. And it's the dry from the moss, lichen and vegetation that stains. Of course, during the wet there are numerous waterfalls cascading over the top. Very beautiful sight. Especially this one back up here now, right where you see that large black mark. Back in behind that rock at the top. Water pours down in the sheet against the cliff face. Another stream gets out over the top. You get two waterfalls in the one spot there. On your eye further forward, you'll see where the water comes over. There are palm trees standing on either side, vertically growing out of the side of the cliff faces. It's this side of the big cliff. Joe Bradshaw, one of the early settlers along the Victoria. I'll tell you more about these adventurous men later on. Wow. This will really convince you we're on the Victoria River. Because here we have Queen Victoria's dressmaker's model. See her standing in the form of a big rock on the end of the cliff face. That's a little less, wasn't it? Hairy chest and all. Or maybe it's fins. Hats on. You can't be until you make a fish now. So we've got our rear board on the right, laying on the bank. Here the engine board. It's a native or whether it's been brought in by birds. They said when they found it, they let me know about 12 months ago, they were thinner than that. So this is the tree to climb up on. Proper bloody grass around here, folks. Make yourself comfortable. If you feel something crawling up your leg, just have a look at the bloke next door. If it's not him, you better jump up.
Is it the grazing that keeps the grass?
Yeah, cattle these days. This day is green for about the end of September. Beautiful area looking back to the east, up all shade, canopy of green over the top. One of the attractions of this area is the unspoilt beauty of it. A true wilderness. I'd say 99.99% of it would never have had foot upon it, untouched since the dawn of time. It was a nice feeling when I was exploring this area to get up on the cliff face and look down the valley and realise you're probably the first white man that's ever stood there and seen that view. And I realised then how the early explorers must have felt and what urged them on. You always want to see a little further. But those cliff faces you're looking at over there, well, that was all part of Delamere country. Now, Delamere is one of the oldest stations in the Northern Territory. The first one taken up was Newcastle, Waters, then Delamere and Springvale. And they're all taken up by Dr. Brown from England. Springvale is now a tourist resort just this side of Katherine. That's the oldest homestead still standing in the Northern Territory. And for many years that was the home of one of our famous writers of the North, a fellow by the name of Tom Romer. He wrote such books as The Pearling Master, Moleskin Midas. Once there was a bagman, which is simply a swagman on horseback, and a vision splendid. And it may have been scenes like this that inspired him for the name of that book, for he spent many years in this district also. But a bit further down here on your right-hand side, and you'll come to the most famous station in Australia, Victoria River Downs, affectionately known as the VRD, or the Big Run with the Bull's Head brand. First taken up in 1884 by an Adelaide company, Fisher and Lyons. The first manager was Lindsay Crawford. Now Lindsay, he was a keyboard operator with the Overland Telegraph line at Daly Waters, one of Todd's men. But he left the keyboard to follow that famous Australian drover, Nat Buchanan, across from Queensland with 2,500 head of cattle, 90 bulls, 160 horses, to establish the biggest cattle station in the world. At that time it covered an area of 13,500 square miles or 9.5 million acres. Same size as Belgium. The main difference was that Belgium had 8 million people. The VRD had 8. Now, food for the stations all had to be brought up the river by barge as far as the depot. That's now known as Timber Creek. But that was the outlet for all the stations in the district. An old bachelor by the name of Matt Wilson established the original store.
Ah, he's a good man.
But Matt, he contracted cancer. And like a lot of lonely old men that lived in the bush, didn't have a lot to live for, so rather than suffer the pain, one night he finished his life with a bottle of rum and a bullet. But his mate, Bertrand Drew, did the grocery run. Now, Bert, he was known as the Donkey King of the North, for he had a team of 300 donkeys. Oh, what a grocery run it was. He'd load up his carts for the stores at the depot, then he'd have to cut his own roads as he went, out through Jasper Gorge. Oh, that was a treacherous place. There the blacks would wait to attack the carts for the flour and the sugar. But he'd push on, blazing a trail right out to VRD, cross over the river further out to Wave Hill, back down to Delamere, right down to Willaroo, wrapping stores all the way, then back home again to Timber Creek. Well, it took him 3 months to get out there, and 3 months to get back. And that was less than 100 years ago. And the donkeys that are still roaming round the flats here today, and there's plenty of them, they're the descendants of Bertrand Drew's team. Now, it was very isolated back in those days. They had no communication with the outside world whatsoever. They were left to their own resources. It wasn't till about the turn of the century that the mail runs were started. And the most famous mailman in the whole of the territory was a fellow by the name of Henry Ventilia Peckham, better known as the Fizzer. You may have read about him in the book, We of the Never Never. It was Henry's great fear that one day he would surely perish from thirst, for he almost did once. One night he lost his horses, and he only just managed to crawl into the Anthony Lagoon homestead on his hands and knees and was saved. But that wasn't to be the way he would go. One day he was jogging back with the mail from Victoria River Downs. When he got to the river, he found that it was in full flood. Now, Henry wasn't a very good swimmer. He wasn't sure what to do. So he sent the black boy back to the station to find out if there was any urgent mail in the bag. The boy came back with a message. There was. The manager's wife was ill, and there was a letter for the doctor in Dartford. A dedicated man, the Fizzer knew he must try and take it through. So he started off taking the lead with the black boy and pack horse to follow. He got about midstream when his horse was struck by a log and he was knocked from the saddle. And as he swept away on the current, he called back to the boy, "Turn back, lad, turn back, save them all!" Well, the boy managed to struggle back to the bank and he ran up and down looking for the Fizzer, but he disappeared. The boy swung the reins to the horse, galloped to the homestead, alerted the men, and they came out with flares all night, and black fellas swimming in the muddy water, and eventually they found his body. And they were the last words that the Fizzer ever spoke. Save them all. So they buried him there on the banks of the river at the old Dashwood crossing, where the men, perhaps going westward in search of work or the precious metal at Halls Creek, would meet. And there was many a bottle of rum that was shared with the mate on the Fizzer's grave. For every year, one of the bagmen would religiously carry a quart pot of paint all the way from Catherine just to paint the grave. And swagman, bagman, parson and potty dodger would doff their hat to the Fizzer when they crossed the beach. And for many, many years, it was a landmark in that land of forget. But they reburied him in the Elsie Homestead Cemetery south of Mataranka. More's the pity. They should have left the old man where he was, rest and easy with his mates. The upshot of the whole story was that the manager's wife, who was ill, and Mrs. Watson, the first white woman ever to reside on Victoria River Down Station, help didn't arrive in time, and she died anyway. Now, one of the first stations ever taken up along the Vic was Bradshaw's Run, out near the mouth. How that came to get there was Captain Joseph Bradshaw, ex-British Navy, acquired a property in the Prince Regent area of Western Australia. Oh, he had some grandiose ideas, Captain Joe, a real nation builder, and all with English money. Well, he thought he might like to try sheep. The Victoria River Down Station was trying them and finding that they weren't working out too well. So one day when Captain Joe came riding up with his purse full of money, he offered to buy the lot. They couldn't get rid of him quick enough. But he found out, much to his dismay, that when he wanted to take him across the border into Western Australia, the government of the day were going to charge him £2 a head for the privilege. Oh, he said, blow the Western Australian government. He simply abandoned his property over there, and it has never been taken up till this day. He packed all his gear in his ship, the Red Gauntlet, and sailed her right around the coast till he got to the Vic River, sailed up over 70 miles, and there, under the shadow of Dome Hill, he established Bradshaw's Run. And it stretched from the mouth of the Victoria River north across the Sandfly Flats to the Fitzmaurice, and where you saw those cliff faces in front of us. That was the extent of Bradshaw's Run. They called them runs in those days because they were such vast tracts of land, none of them really knew where their boundaries were. So wherever their brand of cattle happened to roam, that was their run. Oh, the sheep venture didn't last long. We got a good clip the first year, so we stacked all the bales up on the bank to wait for the birds to come and pick them up. You guessed it, the flood got there first. Half the clip was ruined. Well, by the time the next year come around, what with the floods and the dingoes and the black fellows eating into his flock, they weren't worth shearing. So much for the sheep venture. But back in those bygone days of yesteryear, Captain Joseph Bradshaw, or JP, was the only law in the district. Well, he held court once a year. It just happened to coincide with the Timber Creek races. Well, he'd don his admiral's cap, and with his half-naked black crew he'd sail up the river, and there, under the shade of an old boab tree, he'd use an upturned tea chest for his bench, the butt of his gun for a gavel, and he'd pass sentence on half the town. The other half would enjoy the races. And if you happen to be wandering back this way in September when the Timber Creek races are on, you'll find that things haven't changed much around here. Well, they're not running the same horses. But by the time the races are over, half the town's locked up. You have a look when you're going through Timber Creek. The little town, they got a pretty big jail down there. Oh, by Monday morning, mate, the standing room only. Only got to pay to get in. Well, there was a cook in the garden on Bradshaw's Run. Ivan Igaroff. Ivan the Russian, they called him. Oh, he was a cruel and heartless man, feared and hated by the blacks. And one night they took their revenge, and they massacred him and the rest of the crew on Bradshaw's Run. The police, however, took a far greater retribution on the Aboriginals, rode them down, shot out half the tribe, captured quite a few of the ringleaders, and one of them, a fellow by the name of Kimbutt, they locked up in the Fanny Bay jail for 30 years. And when they finally let him out, 2 days later he'd knock on the door to get back in again. Reckon more tucker inside than was out. Oh, things haven't changed much. That Russian, he put an extensive irrigation system in his garden out there, and for a while the old station was abandoned. And the next manager that came along found that the old homestead was all white anties and just about falling down around his ears. So he struck on the bright idea of using the ant-proof pipes from the garden for the beams and uprights of the new homestead, much to his sorrow. Because when the wet came, the frogs just loved those pipes. Can you imagine? All night, mung, my tenor bass, it was like living in a bell fountain. Well, eventually they had to move out into the storehouse to save their sanity. I reckon even the blacks took to the bush. They thought Ivan the Russian had come back to haunt them. Now, the first station ever taken up along the Victoria or west of the OT line was Wave Hill. And it was taken up by that king of all bushmen, drovers and overlanders, Nathaniel or Bluey Buchanan, back in 1883. One of our unsung explorers of Australia, old Bluey. Few true words have been written about that man. for he had many, many firsts. He was the first man to take cattle up into Queensland to settle Bowen Downs in central Queensland. He was the first man to successfully cross the Barkly Tableland back in 1877 with his mate, Green-Eyed Sam Coker. He was a man of wire and whipcord, Green-Eyed Sam, tough as his nickname. But he had a caustic wit, which eventually brought him undone. He was the manager of the Burn Station, just the other side of Timber Creek. And he got into a card game one night with a yellow fella. They had an argument. The yellow fella shot him. Well, they caught him at Halls Creek, and he was the first hanging in the Fanny Bay Jail in Darwin. That didn't help Green-Eyed Sam. Yellow fella, by the way, in this country is not a Chinaman. He's part Aboriginal and part white. We're black fellas, white fellas, and yellow fellas. None of the terms are taken with offence. Old Bluey Buchanan opened up the dreaded Murrumbidgee track from Newcastle Waters to Top Spring, where wild dogs howl and hedgewoods groan, and night wind whistles in semitones, and bowerbirds play with human bones under a vacant sky, where the drover's mob is a cloud of dust, the drover's mob is a sacred trust, where the devil says can't, and God says must, out on the Murrumbidgee. With its long, dry stages and impenetrable scrub, country that daunted even that intrepid Scotch explorer, John McDowell Stuart. That was instrumental in opening up all the northwest of the Territory and the eastern Kimberleys. And that Buchanan was the first man to take cattle to the Kimberleys, to the Ord River Station. It was he who blazed the trail for the more renowned Durax. He was the first man to take cattle down into Western Australia to the Murchison goldfields, down the Buchanan track. And the highway along that route still bears his name today. And old Bluey Buchanan had the biggest drove ever seen in the history of Australia, most likely the world, when he brought 20,000 head of cattle across from Queensland. He split them into 5 different lots, but he blazed the trail, finding food and water for that great wedge of cattle where no white man had ever trod. So in the meantime, they just grazed the cattle on the southern side of the river. But they were all out round the stock one day. I'd left the cook, Mr. Travers, back in the camp to cook the damp up a dinner. And when they rode back that night, they found that the blacks had attacked. They'd cut off the cook's head with his own axe and was laying in the damp. They were hard times. Oh, but he was a restless soul, old Matt Buchanan, always searching. Further out, further out. And he came back to Wayville once after many, many years. There was only the bookkeeper there. Introduced himself as Mr. Buchanan. Well, it didn't register with the bookkeeper. He just thought he was another old city josser wandering around the bush. Because he rode a camel with a bright green umbrella over the top of it to keep the sun off. They didn't call him Bluey for nothing. Taxed on another, and an old black fella for a mate. What a sight. And when he told the bookkeeper that he was going to go right down through the desert country to the South Australian border, the bookkeeper said, "You're mad." He said, "You'll perish. There's not water down there. Men don't come back from that country." "Oh, we usually find it," said Matt. Well, he tried to persuade him not to go, but to no avail, for when he awoke in the morning, the old man had gone. So when the boss came back from the stock camp, the bookkeeper told him about this old city bloke that had gone on and off into the desert. The boss said, "Oh, bang, we're going to have to go and look for him. Better to find him alive than dead." So they set out. Oh, they found him all right. Way down in the desert country. 3 days later, 100 miles south of home. There he was, sitting under a beautiful big shady gum tree, water all around him half his life. Well, the boss was going to go crying for causing so much trouble. And one of the old Aboriginal stockmen had been on that station for years funding. And he said, "Well, I think that old fella been properly finished. That old pal, Bluey Buchanan. Him know all this country, him belong to this country." Oh, Bluey said, "Oh, I forgot to tell him I was Bluey Buchanan." I can imagine the reunion. Then they will shake hands, smile all around. Yeah, they reckon even the camel will give a bit of a But all that, I was still wandering around this country until it was a fair up. But finally, they persuaded him to settle down in a little farmlet just north of Tamworth in New South Wales. But settling down and leaving his beloved territory must have broke the old man's heart. Even last long. Oh, but I've got a feeling, and I would like to think so, that somewhere to my old Bluey still wandering along the Victoria. It's men like Buchanan that make us proud of our heritage. And there's a wealth of stuff on the Victoria, some fascinating history. But we'll take it back now. When we get back there, we'll have a cup of Billy tea, or say a couple of things, and tell you a couple more yarns about some modern-day characters who are still kicking around the dirt. About finding the soldiers' artifacts in the field. Went to the trouble of learning enough of their language to be able to communicate with them, and they taught me a lot of their culture. And the same like the one the boat tours had bought Springvale Homestead, and he wanted something to attract the tourists out there. So he asked me that I get the fellows together and form them into some sort of robbery that was extendable to the public, and make a commentary to go with it, which I did. Started those robberies back in 1976, still going. I've been taken over by the Aboriginals themselves now, although they've deteriorated somewhat over the years, mainly because of outside interference, and the fact that when I first started off, I used to have 20 to 24 fully initiated members of the Darwin tribe doing the dances, but of course they're old men then, and they're not used to dancing 3 times a week in the natural habitat, so they soon went to leg. There's only a couple of those old blokes left that still do the dancing. But there are about 7,500 different dialects in the Aboriginal language, all have a similar culture, but they have different customs. So when I'm talking about Aboriginal, I'm talking about the Darwin tribe. The fact is that they sit on a flat surface, which is a woman, or a piece of paper bag. And then by this backward and forward, rubbing on the hands and downward pressure, they create sawdust that falls out the little groove I've made on the side. And as this other stick goes through, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter until that sawdust starts to smoulder. As soon as it does, pick it up, put the tip on the dry glass and blow it till it bursts in the flame. Or it may take some considerable time. You might have one bloke on the side go on pretty low when he knocked up his mate on the other side and take over like he was going. In the wet season, there's no dry grass around, everything is wet and sodden. You know what they do? They knock the air tubes down, they get the grass that the termites are stored in the nest, it's nice and dry. So I'll just show you how easy it is to get a bit of smoke going, and eventually, of course, where the smoke is flow. On the street, from out in the Barclay tablelands and across to the VRD, we got some bloody good drinkers in the Northern Territory. Oh, the drinkers of the Territory are black and brown and white. No matter what your colour is, get into it every night. And grab yourself a stubby and sing along with me about those bloody good drinkers in the Northern Territory. We got some bloody good drinkers in the Northern Territory.
from Darwin down to Alice Springs, we're always on a spree. Out in the back we table land and talk to the DRT. We got some regular cricket in the Northern Territory.
Hey! All the verses singing Malapanya in 1939. George Darcy didn't mind at all, in fact he felt quite fine. Perched up on the table with the floods all over the land, drinking rum and a deluge chaser from the Vatican in his hand. And old Jack Mackay used to measure the bobs on the road to Minaroo by the number of OP bottles of rum that'd take him to drink his way through. Well, he's best for a 27 bottler, and he went when you'd bog a duck. But didn't worry Jack on the Minaroo track, he kept singing out, go, 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 good luck! In the bar at Adelaide River, Billy Keaty fell down dead. I wonder why he died laughing, till a fella beside me said he was in with a mob of good drinkers, and the others were all put out. He just knocked off his stubby, and it was his bloody turn to shout. Jost lived terrible close to a place they called the Loo. He lived in an upturned rainwater tank, and he played the didgeridoo. It was he who invented bush champagne. It was he who coined the title to a bloody good slug of metho with a spoonful of Salvato. Oh, he's a top throw, mate, I'll tell you. Actually, Roger Joseph's house was two rainwater tanks, one on top of the other. And it was the only 2 stories older than Borroloola. But after last Cyclone Cathy in 84, it didn't get blown away, it withstood all the cyclone. When they were cleaning up the works after with the bulldozers, they just thought it was so much more debris and bulldozed it out.
Oh.
And out the door went a piece of Borroloola's in. Never mind. Now, getting back to old George Darcy from Malapanya Springs, he took up that station in 1928. It's one of the few stations in the territory that's still in the same family, the Darcy family. George and Elizabeth Darcy had 17 kids, 9 girls and 8 boys. And old George, well, he had to raise most of them, but when they were younger children, one day the mother took one of the younger ones and went off into the bush looking for a pet donkey. Now, in spite of the fact that they had 300 men out in the mines at Tenner Creek, black trackers and police from all over the territory, they just vanished off the face of the earth. Never been found hide nor hair on till this day. So old George, with the help of a couple of old gins, raised the kids. Oh, and he raised some pretty rough, tough men and girls too, I can tell you. Enormous big fellas, eh? Make this bloke over here look like Ronnie Corbin. Oh, the big deep voices like this, even the girls talk like this. My first encounter with him was when I was running the pub out at Borroloola. I hadn't been out there long when one day my wife come scuttling out into the kitchen and said, big rough looking bloke is coming in the house. She said, I'm not going to serve him, you go out. All right, well, out I go. I looked up, oh, bloody hell, no wonder he's bright, right? He's a 6'8", he's got his 10-gallon hat on, high-heel boots, big raw-boned sort of a fella, trousers hanging off his hips, concertina down around his knees. Anyway, I sidled up to him, I said, what can I do for you, mate? Give us a drum of flour. I looked up at him, I stepped back a bit, and he started shaking it, and I said, you want a drum of flour, please. He looked down at me, and I thought, oh shit, this is it. All of a sudden, his face broke into a bit of a grin. He said, all right, then, give us a drum of flour, please! Never got a bloke get a drum of flour, no drinking all his life. Oh, talk about close shave. Well, there's Tom Darcy. We ended up good mates, Tom and I, we still are. We found our level one night, eh? He come down, and big eye come up with it. I've got a pair of high-heel boots and a bottle of rum will do for you. So they're fine people, the Darcys, a whole lot of them. Old Wagga Darcy, he's the oldest old Wagga. He's about 7. And the biggest town that he's ever been to in his life is Borroloola. Stark breed, all right. Never wore boots in his life, Wagga. And he puts that broad, and he can't get it in a normal size stirrupine. He's got to have it stretched out of it. Otherwise, he's got a couple of toes flapping in the breeze. They interviewed him on TV here a few years ago from Big Country. Now, jog your memory, you may remember it. Went a little bit like this. A little interview I said to Wagga, well, Wagga, have you lived in the territory all your life? Oh, not yet! I said, you're getting on, Wagga, about 70. She said, I suppose you're worth, what, about $750,000? Oh, yeah, he said, I suppose that'd be my share. He said, well, why don't you go down and live on the Gold Coast where the climate's not hot, the living's a bit easier, spend the rest of the days in comfort, you got the money. Oh, I'm not going down there, living with all them people. Anyway, if you're going to be looking after all my old mates up here, I've got a few friends up here who was high bloody over here. Well, who were David? Oh, they look at me horses, me dogs, me pigs. pig and my goat, my donkeys and my duck. She said, you never got married, did you, Morgan? Why didn't you get married? Oh, not too late yet, is it? Anyway, I said, what do I want to get married for? He said, any time I want one, I just run one down on the flat. I'll tell you what, he's still catching a few out there, too, old Morgan. Yeah. That's an alternate route you can take. If you're going over to Queensland, see, some people have got terrible minds, haven't they? Instead of going down to the freeways and across, you turn left at Daly Water. That bitumen road takes you right out into the Gold Country. All of 243 mile out. But about 2/3 of the way out, you'll see another road heading south. And right on that corner there now, they built a little pub a few years ago, aptly named the Heartbreak Hotel. Nice friendly little pub, eh? I went in there for a beer one day, you know. 3 days later, I was back. Anyway, head south, you lift the Barclay, right where the new Barclay homestead is now. Bitumen road all the way. Quite narrow, but you don't strike too much traffic out that way. And you never know, you might be lucky enough to strike one of those little Darcy boys in that pub. You can have a very, very interesting afternoon with one of them fellas, I'll tell you. But that is something else, you just buying all the beer. Now you can go out to Malapunya Spring Station if you wish, because a few years ago Fiona Darcy started a little store out there to augment the income. Sells all sorts of things, including souvenirs, and it's not far off the highway. But it's your opportunity to meet and see a real, genuine territory family. That's the Darcys for sure. The salt of the earth, too few of them left. They talk about Beverly Hillbillies, mate, it's like turning the clock back 100 years. But they're fine people. Malapunya Springs, 35 kilometres south of the Heartbreak Hotel and turning for about 6 kilometres. Then, as you leave Malapunya and you wend your way south down that little track, a little further down you'll cross the Little Corella Creek. Now it's called The Famous. You've probably all seen the film or read the book, Robbery Under Arms by Rolf Morley. The story of Captain Starlight. Well, Harry Redford was his name and Pinchin Cattle was his game. And he stole a big mob from central Queensland, drove them down the Channel Country, along the Cooper, and then right across the Great Stony Desert where Burton will perish. Just north of Adelaide, he put them up for sale. But he made one very bad mistake. He stole a big white bull. And that bull was recognised. He was apprehended and charged with cattle stealing. They dragged him right back up into central Queensland to Roma to be tried. Now, despite the judge's direction that they bring in a verdict of guilt, although all stockmen on the jury and they admired his driving fee so much they let him go. But he thought, by geez, I better get out of this country. And so he headed north. Captain Starlight ended up the manager of Burnett Down Station over on the Barclay. Oh, some of the best cattle country in the world over there. With great plains of Mitchell and Flinders grass that you can see forever. An unbroken skyline. But like the Fizzer, Captain Starlight couldn't swim too well. And one night he was coming back from the eyes and he tried to swim that little Spalding Creek and was drowned. So if you're ever going down that way, get yourself a couple of stomachs at the Heartbreak. When you get to Little Corella Creek, you can sit down and have a yarn with Captain Starlight. So that's very, very good. And with that little story, folks, as they say in Yarman language, Kavan, yangan go, yan mongwe, yoko, mopa, moka, lambada, lambada, yoko.
I don't want to go yet.
Sit there.
I don't want to go yet.
We arrived back from this absolutely magnificent trip to find, guess what, all set to head for Katherine, pushed the starter and we had a dead flat battery. Not only a dead flat battery but also the exhaust pipe